So what is project management? What is it really? Well, it's complicated and it's not complicated. The complicated part is actually realizing all the different steps. And it's not complicated because you already do this. You just don't know what the steps are called. So this is going to be the longest section of this chapter. So bear with us, or bear with me as we go over this. So there's 4 phases of project management. We have initiation, planning, delivery, and closure. So initiation, well, as the word says, this is where the project starts. Someone initiates it. So we need to, in order to initiate it, we need to know what our objectives are, the scope, is it feasible? What are our constraints or our limits on this project? And the roles or responsibilities of our key stakeholders and our team members. Planning, we need to break down our ideas into smaller deliverables. You can't just take a huge bite of an elephant, right? You have to eat it one bite at a time. Well, same thing with a project. We have something called a work breakdown structure. That helps us get the entire project done just in smaller chunks. And by that, we can estimate the time and cost associated with each little section. And we can assign these tasks to each member. And we can schedule them and sequence these activities so we can get the project done in a reasonable amount of time. Delivery. We need to monitor, control, and communicate progress of our activities. Our stakeholders, the people who have of interest or are impacted by this project, want to know what's going on. So we need to communicate. And then finally, we close out the project. And we have to create a lessons learned document at the end. So that way, people who do maybe a similar project can figure out, okay, this is similar to that project. They ran into these issues and this is how they solved them. Something as simple as that. So what are the 5 W's of project management? Well, we have why, when, who, what, and whoops. So why? Why should we do this project? Who cares, right? Why? Convince me to do this project. When? What does a success or a win look like? How do we know we've actually succeeded? Who? Who should be involved in this project? Do we involve everybody, or do we only need to do a small team of maybe just 1 or 2 departments of our company? What? What are we actually doing? What does done look like? What does the final product look like of this project? What does the final deliverable look like? And then whoops, what can go wrong? What are the risks associated with this project? How do we mitigate those risks? How do we lessen the impact of those risks? All right, so why? We have the whiff top. What's in it for the other person? So it's a strong why boosts your passion and gives other people the motivation to help you deliver. So have you ever been talked to by somebody about a charity or maybe a church group or some other worthy endeavor, and they're passionate about what they're talking about? They're telling you their why. And you might have been moved emotionally to support that cause. If I give you $1 and I tell you, you have to give it to anybody you want, and it can't include yourself, but you have to at least listen to 5 people before you make your decision. Well, you want to listen to their whys. What their passion could make you passionate. So this is why. Why is the project happening? What's the benefit of the project? How's it going to impact the company? All these things are identified in this section of the project charter. Sometimes you might know it as the business case. All right, so we have our project management triangle. Now, there's a joke that goes along with this, and I'll tell it in just a second. But we have our scope, our schedule, and our budget. The joke is, how do you maintain all this, right? So if someone comes up and cuts your budget gets smaller, what do you have to do? because you are trying to maintain your same scope and schedule, but your budget's smaller. Or what if your schedule is smaller? What happens to your budget and scope? Well, what if your scope is enlarged? You have more to do. What happens to your schedule and budget? If you ever talk to an actual project manager, they will tell you that this triangle is never perfect. And they will laugh if you try to tell them it is. So this right here can tell you if your project's a success because you're going to accomplish your scope. You're going to stay within that. What must be delivered? He says, okay, you have to be in this limitation. This is exactly what you're looking at. Your schedule. Are you on time or are you over schedule? Or are you early? Sometimes being done early is just as bad as being done late, depending on your project. And your budget. Are you under budget, which is usually good? Are you on budget, which is good? Or are you over budget, which is not good? There's varying levels of not good when you go over budget. So this is how you're going to know if your project is a success. It gets more complicated, but this is just kind of the highlights. So if you know anything about project management, this is a highlight. So how do you not fail in your project? And some of you might have already learned these life lessons here. So we have to decompose our project. We have to break it down into smaller, easier to manage units called work packages. How many of you have ever done a research paper, maybe for a class? And you might have broken it down into, you look at this section, you look at this section, you look at this section. I'm going to do this section. We'll get it done by Friday. And then you're both going to edit it. So that way it all comes together. So that right there is helping out. That's decomposing the project. But then we got to delegate those work packages. So we broke it down, but we have to delegate that work by saying, you do this. You're assigning that work package, and hopefully you're putting it to the best person to get the job done. But you don't want to overload your best people. Definitely take into account their abilities. Next, you have to schedule it. Like I said, it's got to be done by Friday, right? So you have to schedule your work package activities based on the duration estimates and dependencies. Sometimes before they can get to this work package, they need to accomplish these other ones first. No, you can't edit the final research paper until the paper is written, correct? So you got to make sure the sequence works, because you don't want people editing a blank sheet of paper. That might be too hard for some people because they might think, well, I guess the text the font color might be white, or it's just that good that they don't do anything because it's so perfect. So you got to look at the schedule and make sure everybody understands the schedule and have them do a reality check on it. Because yes, somebody sitting at a desk, for example, a project manager, can come up with a schedule, but is that schedule feasible? You have to have that looked at, evaluate. So you have to assess the project, the progress of it, what's going on. You have to keep an eye on the scope, the cost, and the time, which is the schedule, and compare that to the project plans. Because your project plan gives you a general high-level 30,000-foot view of what's going on. So let's look at scheduling, since I hit on that. Scheduling is a two-step process. We have to define dependencies. What needs to be done before you can do this next thing? For example, you're looking to get a college degree. What needs to be done before you can get the college degree? You need to attend class, right? Well, what needs to happen before you attend class? Well, you need to register for class, right? Well, what happens before that? You need to be admitted into the college. And you can work backwards on that. But the next step, after you do that, after you know how things work, what depends on the next? Estimate the duration. How long will each activity take to complete? For example, An academic semester is roughly 16 weeks long, give or take a week or two. So if you can estimate 16 weeks for a course, well, how many courses do you need to take? But some of them are going to run concurrently, meaning at the same time. So you might be thinking, okay, well, there's essentially 8 semesters. 4 years, 2 semesters, a year, 8 semesters. Or, well, what if you take summer? Use the summer semester to take some classes. Well, now that 4 years has now come down, right? So scheduling, you got to look at this thing. So defining dependencies. You can also think of that as what is the prerequisite to the course you want to take. For example, Math 200 might require Math 100 before moving on. Or Accounting 202 might require Accounting 201. Simple as that. Think of it that way. All right. Next, we need to sequence and evaluate the durations of a work package. Here, it looks like looking at the activities, interviewing caterers, check caterer references, select a learning package. An event is going on here where it looks like there's going to be food. Well, we have interview caterers. That's going to be the overall because it's got a 1 there. So underneath that, we have a 2. So starting on January 15th, that week, it's going to take 1 week to check the caterer's references. And 3, we have 2 under 3 here. So we have 3A and 3B. Check linen package and select menu items. So you see how all these things run together here. For example, 3A and 3B both start on January 22nd, but they end differently. But the 4, activity number 4 there, signed caterer contract, starts on January 4th and it's 1 day. But however, January 4th is the end of the menu items. So I'm guessing that this catering contract has a dependency of the menu items. So you see how this works here? One can't start before the other one. For example, you can't check the caterer's references until you interview the caterers. So what do you do if your schedule slips? Something takes longer than it's supposed to. Well, you have to reanalyze what's going on. You have to reanalyze your work packages. There might be something, for example, a lot of estimates are high. And if you can get something done in an hour, how long do you normally say it will take you? 2 hours? If it's going to take you a day, you might say, oh, it might take me 2 or 3 days. Yeah. So most of the time, you have enough schedule to accommodate for these slips. However, you might have to consider the trade-offs here. If one activity is critical, part of your critical chain, you might have to look at what activities going on happened or what is going to be affected, like a domino effect. So if things are shifted 1 week, how does that impact your final completion date? Is that going to push you over your final scheduled date? If it is, and it's going to go past the project's completion date, what can you do to not go over your deadline? That might be a trade-off. You might have to work a weekend to take care of that. And you got to communicate all this. Telling your stakeholders that you're running into problems is not a problem. You're communicating. That way they understand what's going on, so that way they're not surprised when it actually happens. You got to communicate. Because the worst thing to happen is all of a sudden you tell them, oh, the project failed. And they have no idea that it was failing. They thought it was going good because they heard nothing. Communicate. So your project delivery, you have to perform to your promise. So you got to monitor, make sure everything is going as it's supposed to. Control it. Control your budget. Control your schedule. Control your scope. And, oh, there's that word again, communicate. So if you can do these 3 things, you're going to do pretty well when it comes to delivering your project. But what about when let's say you've done everything you're supposed to. You've delivered your project. Your stakeholders are extremely happy. Your customer is ecstatic. They're so overjoyed. They want to give you a bonus, maybe promote you to CEO of the company. Yes, I know I'm exaggerating, but go with me on it. But what about your closeout? Well, you don't just hand over the project and say, okay, everybody's done. No. You have to do the administrative stuff. For example, performance reviews. If you're sending everybody back to their home department because they were temporarily assigned to you, you have to do a performance review on them. That way there's something on file for when they're been working with you, because how can their manager evaluate the time that they were with you? They can't. And who knows? That might lead to a promotion or a pay raise for them because of the work they did for you. You don't want to hinder that, do you? But we also have our lessons learned. So we learn by the mistakes we've had and we analyze them. Let's say we went over budget by 10%. Well, what caused us to go over budget by 10%? When we were in the middle of it, we were freaking out because, oh my God, we went over budget. But now that we've completed the project, let's look back and see what happened. What caused that? How can we prevent that in the future? What did we learn from that? And then we have what's called our post-implementation review, which we'll get into the next slide. But the project's not officially closed until we do these things. We have to dot every I and cross every T. So our post-implementation review, we have to be customer focused. We have to be objective. We have to be unbiased when we're objective. We can't let our own personal bias or our company bias or anything like that affect us. Consider the positive and negatives. No project is perfect, just like no forecast is 100% accurate. Find out what went wrong and learn from it. You're going to learn a lot more from making a mistake than you do from not making a mistake. Use hindsight to your advantage. You can't identify everything that can possibly happen in the project. If you could, you might as well just go ahead and play the lottery, because you should just guess the Powerball numbers and win millions of dollars and you don't have to work. But hindsight, look back. How could you have done things better? What didn't go well? What went well? If it went well, is there a way to duplicate that thing that you did well in the future? So we have to focus on the future also. Avoid blame. Yeah, it might have been so-and-so's fault, but how can we avoid that issue in the future? Learn from the experience. So demand candidness. You need open and honest feedback. You don't want people to hold back. Because when they hold back because they want to be politically correct or, all this inoffensive or stuff like that, that's not going to get you anywhere. You want people to be honest. If they think that the leadership was junk, well, they should be able and comfortable enough to say that the leadership was junk. And they should be able to explain why. That's really what's important, is to find out that why. And you got to document all this. That way, if there's a similar project in the future, that new project manager can take a look at this and see, oh, this is what happened this time. And I'm going to do all these things so I can try to avoid these bad things, or I'm going to try to duplicate these good things. So if we can do that, we'll be fine. We'll be doing great. But this was a highlight of what project management is. I mean, we can go on for hours talking about a project management and just what it is and what it's not. But unfortunately, this video was already too long, and let's go ahead and move on to the work breakdown structure, which is our next video.